Only God would take the foolish things of the world. My wig, I study for hours. And the most powerful thing about my message was me taking my wig off. God told me in that moment, though, I want you just as you are. You don't have to change. I'll use it. And it may not look like what's been seen before. It may not be as polished. It may not feel as rigid as some of the things that have been effective in the past. But it will be you, and I will show up, and I will use it all. And so here I am. You know, I'm 35, and so people are like, are you guys finished having children? And I was like, you know, whatever the Lord says, but don't say that.
La, la, la.
Do not say that. But I've been a mom my whole life. I had my son at 14 years old.
Yeah.
I've been a mom my whole life. And I wanted to be a good mom at 14. And I had a lot of emotional development to do, and spiritual development, and mental development, and I was a baby when I had a baby. But I wanted to be a good mom, and so I leaned into what I thought a good mom should look like, what type of household I should provide for him, what type of schedule he needed. And so you talk about the enemy meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. God meant this. He turned this thing, changed it into something that allowed me to be grounded in so much wisdom and experience that now at 35, I think sometimes I do sound like, you know, maybe someone who's a little bit further down the road, but the road started pretty early for me. As someone who didn't really think that they were gifted or had anything that the world could offer, what I didn't realize is that, like, my one thing was just saying yes to living right for God.
Wow.
Like, I can't sing. I didn't think writing was a gift. I guess I'm a speaker. I didn't think that I was like a talented speaker. It's not like I've been waiting for this moment where I could unleash my talent into the world and being not like I had never lived like that. My one thing was, I think I can do better than this.
Wow.
That was my one thing.
But that's huge.
It's huge. And if people can realize, everything is, you know, there's a lots of glitzy, glammy things happening on social media that makes you think that, like, I need to write a book, I need to write music, I need to do something that feels like a big thing. But if all you can say is, I can do better than this, that one thing, God will take care of the rest. Yeah. God will take care of the rest. I want to live like Jesus is real, and I can be transformed into his image. And today I'm going to make a choice that reflects that belief. That one thing, it changes everything.
I love that phrase, that one thing has multiplication assigned to it. Because I think that we almost wait for it to be multiplied before we use it.
Right.
You know? Because I remember when I was invited to speak for the first time at Women of Faith, they called me and I'm like, no, I don't speak. I'm not a speaker. Yeah. And the thought of speaking to women terrified me, because I've always thought women can be mean.
Yeah.
And they said, well, you know, we feel you're supposed to be part of the team. Would you at least come and meet the other women? And I was like, well, okay. And I remember sitting down and one of them saying, you know, I'm agoraphobic, didn't leave my home for 10 years. I buried my daughter when she was 18 days old. And I thought, well, actually, I could fit in here.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that was clear was that Jesus was the hero of every story.
Yeah.
Because I thought, if I have to stand up there and be like Wonder Woman for Jesus, we're all in trouble. But when Christ is the hero of the story, it's a story that is well worth telling.
It's such a shame that when I'm preaching that I act like Wonder Woman, because that too is my belief. I don't know, something does happen when I get up there where I look like Wonder Woman. But I get excited about people getting it, but that's totally my story too. And if he does not breathe on the message, I have nothing.
Yeah.
So when I catch that breath, I definitely feel like I have on a cape. But
I love watching you like that, because it's so obvious. There's never an air with you of, look what I've got. It's like you're so genuinely excited about what you understand about the goodness of God, that you want everybody else to catch the aroma of that.
I do, yeah. He causes us to triumph, and then we get to be that fragrance.
One of the things I do that has really helped me, because I still don't, I mean, I go out and speak, but I still don't feel like that I went naturally. Because I've worked with people who are just natural storytellers, and you know, you could hear them 20 times and it's still fascinating. I'm not like that. So what I do before I got on the platform, I have this internal thing where I'll say, like, after you, Lord. And I have this conscious thing of, okay, we're going up there together. Okay. And then I know, you know, it's like I'm under catered one more time, just fish and loaves, big crowd, not enough. But I think that's when God loves to show up.
I'm going to steal that. One thing I do before I'll read my text or my scripture, and then I'll pray. And almost every single time, I'm like, no fear, no nerves, no anxiety. I think that when I pray in that moment, that I'm supposed to be like praying for the people in the room. I'm praying for myself. I'm like, God, please. And then there's the other part of me, Lord, I'm like, God, if this is going to be how you end it, because you want me to be up here stumbling, bumbling, and failing, like, just make that clear, because I'll never do it again. But if I'm supposed to be up here, give me peace, give me your pace, give me your power, and I will go wherever you want me to go. I'll say whatever you want me to say, as long as you don't leave me up here by myself. And the moment he stopped showing up,
oh, yeah. We're all going home. Yeah.
We gotta go. I do not want to be making stuff up.
But I think that's the most freeing, liberating thing.
Yeah.
Because I mean, somebody wrote in my school annual, least likely to do anything. And she was a friend of mine. And it was because my father had died by suicide when I was little, and I was just terrified. I grew up just so full of fear. Couldn't travel for more than 3 miles in a car without throwing up. Now I've got 4 million miles in American Airlines. But I think when you put your not enoughness into the hands of our God who's more than enough, that's when miracles happen.
It really does. I mean, his strength is made perfect in our weakness. And I am a living testimony, and I will never become so whatever that I forget to tell people how little he's working with. Like, when he got me, he didn't get a whole lot to work. And I'm okay with that. Compared to how much he's giving, I gave him a lot of little. I gave him a lot of little in return. And anything that you see that looks big and amazing and powerful that comes out of my life is partnership. It's not me.
Do you ever find yourself in a situation, or like, I remember I had been speaking for several years, and then I found myself back in a place where a lot of hard things had happened in my life. It was actually back at the 700 Club, back at CBN. And I found like all these old negative things of things I believed about myself back then, just kind of deciding to just jump up again. Do you ever have to deal with stuff from the past or people from your past, or how does power move there?
Oh, child. Okay, so listen. I was living in I met my husband. I moved to Los Angeles. We lived there for 8 years. It seems like we're going to build our life out there, and everything's just going to be settled. And I'm TD Jake's daughter, and that is how most people have introduced me. Questions people want to know is, what is it like to be TD Jake's daughter? And so I think living in Los Angeles really created a sense of individuality. I think even in the way that I speak, that I didn't feel the pressure to be like TD Jake's daughter when speaking. I could just be Sarah Jakes Roberts for this community in Los Angeles, and they would get me, and this is the space where I will feel fulfilled. In God's wisdom, he's brought us back to Dallas to be a part of the leadership team of the Potter's House Dallas. And all of a sudden, I feel like the 8-year-old girl who moved from West Virginia back to Dallas, lost in a world that was maybe bigger than me, maybe that I didn't really fit into. My daughter was 14 at the time that we moved. She was actually 13, turning 14. I got pregnant at 13. And turned 14 when I had my son. And all of that came crashing down at the same time. Am I built for whatever leadership looks like in Dallas? Can I raise my children in a world where I felt like I got lost? If I create these boundaries, is it going to damage their relationship with my parents? So I've got all of these doubts swarming there. I'm like, well, if you didn't do this at all, you wouldn't have anything to worry about. I would say for someone who's experiencing that, to stay in the tension. To stay in the tension of figuring out why this is coming to the surface. There was a message I preached that was called Glory Triggers. And because, I'm a huge mental health advocate, and we hear a lot about trauma and triggers. But I preach glory triggers because I wanted people to understand that God's got triggers too. And there are some things that happen in your life where it feels like something negative is coming to the surface. But if you stay in the tension, you will see how God's glory is connected to that thing that was maybe once painful. And I stayed in the tension. And what I learned in staying in the tension is that God did not call me into a space that would require me to change what I know about him. That would require me to change what I know he has highlighted as important for me. It is important to me that my children feel connected to me no matter where I am. It is important to me that this ministry that God's given me, it was built on authenticity and vulnerability. God's not going to call me into something that's going to change what he told me my assignment was. And so this tension was convincing me that I would need to change, modify, conform. But if I could stay rooted, if I could stay anchored in what God said to me, this wave was going to pass. And I'll tell you this, and then I will be quiet.
Oh, no, keep going.
So I'm in this tension. The negative thoughts are swarming, but I'm staying in the tension. I'm still saying yes. I'm going to be in Dallas, but I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not. I'm going to be my authentic self, and they're going to like it or they're going to send me back to Los Angeles.
Good with either.
I'm going to say yeah, right. I'm going to be good with either. I'm going to say yes when I can say yes. I'm going to say no when we have volleyball practice. I'm going to keep the main thing, and we're going to see what happens. And so I was having a Sunday. My father was going to be out of town. My husband was going to be out of town. I don't even think my mother was there, which these are all my comfort support system, because I'm like, if I fail, I'll toss the mic to them. I'll go to the back. Nobody's there. It's all on me. And I'm preaching this message, and I'm preaching this message. As the message is called Lock In. Sheila, I'm preaching the message. I'm doing so good. It's Sunday. I'm doing so good. My notes made sense when I woke up. You know, I've got to do offering. I'm doing the words, like the announcements. I'm doing so good, girl. I look, and there's this woman in the crowd, and, you know, people are standing, and I'm speaking, and I'm hitting some points. Yeah. I'm like, oh, we're doing good. And I see her do this gesture, and I was like, I've never seen worship look like that before, but go for it. Then I go to the other side. I see this other woman do this gesture. Sheila, my wig is sliding off of my head. Sheila, my wig.
That's not a glory trigger.
That is not a glory trigger. So, you know, I try to give her a little tug. I try to put her back in alignment. She's rebellious, okay? She's a backslider.
God.
There's no one to toss the mic to. So I took it off.
You took it off? Okay, I have a whole new respect.
Sheila,
next level.
I took it off. I took it off. I threw it to my sister, and I kept preaching. And I was like, this is a disaster. This is a disaster. I take my wig off, I throw it to my sister, and then after that service, I'm like, okay, well, we're going back to the West Coast. West Coast, best coast. Who cares? Who cares about the South? So many people said that when you took your wig off, it felt like you pulled shame out of my body. Like, it felt like I had permission to be myself. And I think it was God showing me. And it went viral. Sherry Shepherd does a thing on it. I'm like, and then I'm like humiliated in this church where I grew up, where I experienced humiliation. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's terrible. There were so many positive responses to women being like, I finally feel free to be myself. Like, I don't have to show up perfect all of the time. I can do this one day. I can do something else the next day. I feel like God can use me no matter what condition I am in. And I'm like, only God would take the foolish things of the world. Yeah. My wig, I study for hours. And the most powerful thing about my message was me taking my wig off. God told me in that moment, though, I want you just as you are. You don't have to change. I'll use it. And it may not look like what's been seen before. It may not be as polished. It may not feel as rigid as some of the things that have been effective in the past, but it will be you, and I will show up, and I will use it all. And so here I am.
Don't you think there was something prophetic about that moment? There's something about that I think God uses. I mean, if you think about some of the things that the Old Testament prophets did, you were like, no, dude, back off the caffeine.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think that there was something about that just, it spoke a greater truth sometimes than our words ever could. That you get to come as you are, not as you wish you were. That's one of my main life messages is, I remember when Christian was little and he would travel with us, and we'd had a birthday party backstage for the crew, and it was a chocolate cake, and Christian was covered in chocolate. And my mother-in-law was taking him back to the hotel to have a bath. And I was about to be introduced to go on stage, and I hear this little voice behind me saying, Mommy! And he just wanted one more hug.
Yeah.
And I knelt down, and I knew what was going to happen. I knew I was going to get frosting all over the suit. It's cream. I've never worn it since. In my hair. And it's one of the reasons I like working with women. They get the frosting in the hair thing.
Yeah.
But it was really intentional because I wanted him to see You don't clean yourself up to come to your mom because you don't clean yourself up to come to your father. And I think what happened in that moment, Sarah, what you did for people was to show what that looks like. You could have told them that for 2 hours.
Yeah.
It would not have been as powerful as what you physically did, as liberating as, I mean, God's doing something through your life. And honestly, that's why I want you to get this. This book, it's called Power Moves, and it's different than anything you've read before. You know, sometimes you think, well, I've kind of read everything that's out there. This is not, 10 things to be more like Jesus or 52 ways to cook chicken for the Lord. This is a different kind of book. I love the emphasis you have on community, on us needing one another. Yeah. Like if you have this vision inside of you and you're not quite sure to do, find somebody else, find somebody who you could partner with. Has that been important for you?
For sure. I mean, it's why I know you. I mean, I was telling my story, and I was telling it through a blog, and then through partnership, and me being able to come on the Women of Faith tour, I got to speak in some spaces that I had never been in before, to connect with women who were much further down the road in ministry than I was. And let me tell you, part of doing Women of Faith is part of the reason why I believe I became confident as a speaker. Growing up as a Black girl in church, like most of the women preachers that I had seen at the time were like so forceful in their delivery in a beautiful way.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
but with power. And I was, all I had was this story, and I was like, I don't know if I could ever show up with that much force. I don't know if I could ever show up with that much passion. And when I did Women of Faith, I saw passion with a different expression. I saw that power moves, right? And so when I was doing it, I was like, if I can do it like that, then I could do it. And then I was able to exercise that muscle. And so through partnership, we see the different ways that power shows up. We are allowed to see other people's power, highlight our power, or help us to polish areas of ourselves where maybe we didn't think we had power. And so community is everything. Even though we are the most connected generation with social media and the internet, we're also the most isolated. Yeah. And we are very rarely getting outside of liking and commenting to connect and then flourish. And so I try to encourage that, but I try, because I'm an introvert, I try to remove all of the barriers. Like if you could just do it with, follow someone different. If you could just connect with someone on the comments, go to a meet and greet, to take baby steps, because I know it can be overwhelming to get out of our comfort zones.
Yeah. One of the things that you talk about in the book too is you talk about shame, and I don't know what shame means to you, perhaps. I always define it a little bit like this for myself, that guilt tells me I've done something wrong, and shame tells me I am something wrong. A lot of the women that I speak to deal with shame. It's something that I think as a daughter of the King, we shouldn't wear. I mean, David said in Psalm, those who look to him for help will be radiant with joy, no shadow of shame will touch their faces. Do you ever feel those old voices coming back? And what do you do if you feel that kind of, oh, who are you kidding?
I think the wig thing was a thing, for real.
That would be a life-altering moment.
In the moment, I was like, whatever. That's generally my energy when I'm speaking. I'm like, whatever, let's go. I'm for it. And then when, the glory lifted a little bit.
Yes, the cloud cleared.
I was like, excuse me, God? Why did you allow that to happen to me? Primarily because I felt so embarrassed. Like, when I was out of that, I was like, this is so embarrassing. And I felt ashamed. I'm like, you've made a mockery of the pulpit, Sheila, girl. I looked down at the altar during altar call, and another lady had taken her wig off. I was like, we got wigs on the altar.
You started a movement.
Not
it's not pretty.
And I take so much care with that platform. I don't take it lightly. And to think that someone would maybe think that I made a mockery of it, because a lot of people were like, you did it on purpose, or this was like a thing. I was like, who? I don't even do illustrated sermons. Do you think I would go from no illustrated sermons to taking my wig off? Are there no steps? But I felt a lot of shame. And I'm like, see, this is why girls like you don't need to do stuff like this, because you can't keep it on the level. And I recognize where the voice is coming from, though. And I think that shame does still arise, but when you know the source of the shame is coming from the outside, then you start to patch up the inside. And so I'm like, you need to get off of social media. You need to stop thinking so much about yourself in this moment and really trust God's plan. And so it's easier to hit ignore when you know where the call is coming from. But it takes some time to do that.
Yeah. I remember the church I was growing up in, there was a lady who was always, like if you needed anything, you could call her and she'd bring food, she'd do anything. But I only discovered later how much internal trouble she was in herself. And I remember talking to her about it, and she said, well, I want to serve the Lord. And she felt taking care of herself was almost ungodly or unholy. You kind of address that in the book, that if you want to be available, it's like what you talk about in your marriage. When you bring the whole of who you are into that, it's better for everybody.
Yeah.
How do we address that in women, that it's good to take care of yourself? That's okay.
You know, I think that we have to dismantle philosophies that make us believe that it is our responsibility to be the savior in our household. And when you are the person that people come up to when they have boo-boos or when a friend is in crisis, they know that they can call you. It moves you from being a person to a savior. And if we're honest, we often even allow our ego to feel a little bit good that, like, I showed up for them. They know I can take care of them. They came to me. And so when you're building an identity that is not congruent with your reality, you can get trapped in between the two. And so you choose to keep showing up for people instead of sitting in the fullness of who you are. What I say to women is that if you're going to continue to serve everyone and you're going to make sure you fulfill everyone else's needs, the least you can do is ask yourself, well, what do I need?
Wow.
What do I need? Because if you're willing to run yourself empty because you recognize that a need needs to be fulfilled and you're the one who's going to do it, you have to ask yourself, how am I allowing others to fulfill my needs? Because needs are important. That's why you're doing everything.
Yeah.
What are your needs? Can you give them language? Even if you're like, well, no one can do anything about it, but can you give it language?
Yeah.
Can you put it in the atmosphere? Can you acknowledge that you are not just here as a machine, that you are a person? And then when someone asks you, do you need something? The answer is more readily available on your lips because you've taken the time to acknowledge that I am a need filler and I am a need needer.
Very well said.
And it's easier to ask for help when you know what you need, but when you don't know what you need because you never acknowledge that you have them, then you can't take advantage of the resources that God puts in your life.
I know without a shadow of a doubt that you have loved this program. It's one of the things I have loved about Sarah since the moment I met her is her honesty and her sense of humor and her humility and her strength. And I think of those of you who are watching who think, I so wish I could be like that. And it's one of the reasons I highly recommend this book. I mean, I get to read a lot of books. This book makes a difference. So I highly recommend that, that you would get a copy for yourself, maybe get one for a friend, somebody you think might be struggling. But I just want you to know right now how much you are seen and loved and valued by God. It's so easy to look at all the social media things and think, I wonder why I wasn't invited to that, or I wonder what's wrong with me, and I'll never be this, or I'll never be that. I think when you begin to understand the value that Christ has placed on your life, when we were getting ready to sell our house, I asked our realtor, how do we know how to price it? And he said, well, it'll sell for what anybody thinks it's worth. What Christ thought you were worth was his very own life. And just remember that here at TBN that we care about you. We're not just out to just yakety yak and sell books. We're out to bring things that we believe will make a significant difference in your life. And the great thing is, when you come to God as you really are, when you tell him the whole truth, because let's face it, he's seen your movie. He knows everything. He knows everything and has chosen to love you right now, that then you're able to let his love fill that grace space in your life. And then you become that light on a hill. You become that someone who just brings the fragrance of Christ wherever you go. Sarah, I want to thank you just for being you, just for showing up. There's something just so delightful about you.
Thank you.
And thank you for this book.
Oh, thank you. It is my offering to the world. And, I wrote it because a lot of people were telling me, oh my gosh, you're such a powerhouse. You're so powerful when you preach. But I didn't really feel powerful when I preached. I felt powerful when I was at home. I felt powerful when I was walking around, loving on my husband and scratching my head. And I think that we need permission to experience power in a multitude of ways. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to share what God's given me.
So if there was one thing, if people could only take away one thing from your book, what would you want that to be?
Never stop searching for the power that is present in this moment. No matter how difficult it is, No matter how dark that grief is or that heartbreak is, never stop looking for the power that can lift you out of your despair, that can lift you out of your shame. It is present, and power is present in every single moment. But you have to be sensitive to look forward, and you have to trust that it's there.
Beautiful words from a beautiful woman. Remember, from all of us here, from Matt, Laurie, the whole crew, we love you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.